right. We are in this month of September working our way through Ephesians 5 and 6. We've been thinking about this section we call the household codes. And we began 2 weeks ago by talking about what it means to make the most of the time, which is a line from Ephesians chapter 5. And then last week we talked about the importance of fitting in our generation, so our spouses and our friends. This week, we're going to talk about fitting in the next generation into our mega stuff lives. And so we're going to read just 4 verses, Ephesians chapter 6, verses 1 through 4. You're going to notice a reference to the first commandment with a promise. This is Paul reminding us of the 10 commandments, right? The commandment to honor your father and mother so it may go well with you in the land the Lord your God is giving you. So we're going to pick up, this is Ephesians chapter 6, verse 1. Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother. This is the first commandment with a promise, so that it may be well with you and you may live long on the earth. And fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. I have been thinking a little bit this week about what it means to be a good parent. And I went looking for words of wisdom, and I found this little bit by Jim Gaffigan, who's a largely clean comedian, about his experience parenting his 5 kids and what it means to be a good parent. I just want to play that for you.
Sometimes when people find out I have 5 kids, they think I'm good at parenting, which is kind of like assuming people with lots of cats are not crazy. I have no idea what I'm doing, and there's no learning curve. It's not like when you learn from one child, you can apply to another one, because kids are annoying. They're like individual humans with their own interests. I encounter this constantly. I'm like, all right, you want to play basketball, you want to do parkour, and you want to do karate. Well, you're all doing basketball. Because this guy's only making 1 trip. And if you don't like it, you can blame your brother, whatever his name is. I do try. I try to be a good dad. My wife and I, we try to be good parents. We try so hard. Not that you'd be able to tell. Like if you met one of my sons, you might think, oh wow, Jim decided not to parent this one. What, did he feed him in a cage? We try to get our sons to sit at a dinner table like humans. It's not in their nature. Eventually, all parents ask themselves, like, am I having any impact at all? Is it nature or nurture? You know, the parents of NBA players are probably pretty confident it was mostly us. But you know, the Dahmers were like, we had nothing to do with this. You know, if you have young children, you might think I'm being negative, but if you have teenagers, you're like, Jim's being nice. Parenting is hard the entire time. The task changes, though. When you have a baby, you're like, this is the hardest thing I've ever done, but I would do anything for this baby. And when you have a teenager, you're like, this is the hardest thing I've ever done, but I don't want to go to jail for murder. 5 kids is a lot. My parents had 6 kids, but it was easier back then because they didn't care.
Okay. That's it. Go home. See you later. So I think about what makes someone a good parent, right? What's the standard for being a good parent? And reflect for a minute about your own parents and whether you think they were good parents or not. Some of them don't look at your mom right now. Some of you might look back and say, oh, unequivocally, they were amazing. Or, you know, maybe you had a complicated relationship with your folks. But I'm just curious, were your parents good parents, and how would you tell? Like, what's the standard that makes someone a good parent or not? I love the line at the end. He says, my parents had 6 kids, but parenting was easier back then because they didn't care. And it's funny, but there's some important wisdom in that. In fact, there's a ton of research that talks about the fact that parents now spend more time with their kids than really any other time in human history. There's a great book we've talked about a lot called The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt. In it, he pulls out some research about the lack of free play time that kids have. And actually, just put this graphic up for me. And so he tracked time spent parenting, these are hours per week, by moms from 65 to 2007. And what I want you to notice that it's pretty flat, about 15 hours a week from 65 to 95, right, or 92. And then somewhere in the mid-90s, it starts shooting up. And the time almost doubles, right? The amount of time that a mom spends with her kids almost doubles. Now, that top line is college-educated. The bottom line is not college-educated families. There was a trend for a while that college-educated families were spending more time with their kids. That is gone now. So by around 2000, this only goes 2007, around 2010, additional research was done that said pretty much all parents, this is in America, spending that increasing amount of time with their kids. And here's what I recognize is so interesting. You can make that go away. Thank you. What's so interesting for me is that we have begun to define good parenting by the quantity of time we spend with our kids. And because we love them, and because we're really trying, and because we've heard from our culture that that is the metric, we are spending more time than ever with our children. And yet, all the research in the world would tell us that Gen Z is less happy and more anxious and more depressed and more isolated than ever before. So, I got good news and bad news. Here's the bad news. The bad news is we are spending more time parenting. It's having less effect, and we have less time for other things in our lives, right? To spend time with our spouses or our friends, or to go to church, or for having other adult relationships. And all of that extra time isn't really resulting, it doesn't seem, in us being better parents. Like your parents didn't spend this much time with you, did they? Were your parents good parents? Here's the good news. The good news is, I believe that Paul has some very simple wisdom for us to say that as parents, our goal is not to stuff in more of our kids' activities into our lives. That somewhere along the line we got confused. And that the goal was never for us to just be more busy with them, but that what we're doing in that time is really what matters. And I love this passage in Ephesians because Paul just gave us almost 10 verses on how to be married. And then he gives 3 verses on how to be a kid, and then he gives 1 verse on being a parent. I should have done this. In my office, I bet I have a stack of books this high on how to parent. I read them all. Many of them were very helpful. Paul's like, yeah, you need 1 verse. Not to answer every problem, right? But to have a clear focus. The 1 verse is, bring them up. Oh, no. Oh, this is my kid's favorite part. Do not provoke your children to anger. I got you. But bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. We make the most of the time not by cramming more in, but by leaning into this one end goal, that I want to bring my kids up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. I think if we begin to shift what it means to be a good parent in our heads, or a good grandparent, or a good teacher, or a good Sunday school teacher, or a good youth leader, when we begin to shift that from, I spend enough time with you, to, I am pointing you to Jesus, it dramatically changes how we think of ourselves and how we spend our time with the next generation. So I did some math this week. I wanted to know how much time I spent in a given week driving my kids from place to place. Actually, my wife and I together, how much time we spend driving our kids from place to place, how much time we spend on the sidelines, or in concert halls, or in ice rinks watching them perform. And so I added up all the driving. I added up picking up from school and getting them ready for school in the morning and walking to the bus stop and all the sports. and it came out to about 1 billion hours a week. Give or take. And some of that time is really valuable, right? And some of that time is me literally on the sideline cheering or groaning or worrying as one of my kids is performing, or pretending to care when my kid's not on the field and other people's kids are performing. And I care. And we have been told, right, that that's what it means to be good parents. And we believe that so deeply that when we miss something, we have this incredible guilt. I talked to a mom a few weeks ago. Her daughter was in a performance, and this mom had taken her daughter to practices for months, before the performance. And then there were 2 dress rehearsals. There was the first dress rehearsal, which was sort of less formal, then the more formal dress rehearsal, and then there were 2 performances over the weekend, the official performances. And this mom had taken her daughter to all of the practices. She made it to the informal dress rehearsal. Then she missed the formal dress rehearsal. Then she went to both performances that weekend, the live shows. And she had this incredible guilt. She said, "Jim, I just can't believe I missed that second dress rehearsal." And I said, "What are you talking about?" And we genuinely feel that, right? We genuinely feel like I have to be everywhere at everything. And so I want to say today, while there is no loving without presence, there's no discipling without presence, presence is really important. But I want to say attending isn't parenting. Attending isn't parenting. And we are chasing a model the world has given us, but what parenting and grandparenting looks like, because we don't have a better one. And our kids don't need fans, they need mentors. And we'll bring them up in the instruction and discipline of the Lord. So other than the refs, there are 2 kinds of people on a sideline, right? You have coaches and you have spectators. And coaches are actively involved in giving instruction to the players on the field, and spectators are passively there offering some sort of support and observation. And I believe our culture has told us that our job as parents is to be spectators in our kids' lives. And Scripture tells you your job is to be coaches. Your job is to be coaches, to coach your kids in the way of the Lord. That's what wisdom, that's what Proverbs is all about. This instruction to gather wisdom is all about this idea of coaching your family. I don't know if you noticed, but twice just in that 4th chapter, the author, probably Solomon, says, "Listen, my child," or "Listen, my son, for my instruction." Actually, the first 8 chapters of Proverbs are all a father passing on wisdom to his son. And what he's trying to do is coach his son to seek the wisdom of God, coach his son to understand the dangers of sexual immorality and adultery, coach his son to not be lazy but to be a hard worker, coach his son to trust in the Lord and lean not on his own understanding. And I believe this is more than anything what our next generation needs from us, right? They need coaches in the spiritual life. So it's great if you drive your kids to sports and show up at their events, and it's great if you help them with their homework in the evening, and those are important parts of parenting. But hear me, what they really need is for you to talk with them about what matters. How did you come to know Jesus? And what are the spiritual struggles in your life that you've been through that your kids might learn from? And what wisdom have you gleaned in that generation of learning and following Jesus? My parents were great, and they showed up at all of my stuff, right? They showed up at my orchestra concerts and my soccer games and my karate stuff, and they were always there. But I got to tell you, I don't remember a single thing they said from the sidelines at any of those events. You know what I remember? I remember doing Advent and Lenten devotionals with them around our kitchen table and reading the Bible together and lighting little candles together and talking about what it meant that Jesus was born for me, that Jesus died and rose for me. I remember when my friend in high school was suicidal and had to be admitted into a hospital for that situation. I remember the conversation I had with my parents as they talked me through, like, how do I love somebody who's going through that kind of crisis? I remember watching my parents as my grandmothers, their moms died. and how they showed me to mourn with hope. I remember the conversation around the kitchen table when they forced me to go to youth camp. You guys know the story. They said, I want you to go to Montreat, this week-long Christian camp with our church. And I said, I don't want to. And they said, we don't care. And I remember the second conversation the week afterwards when I came back, right? And I said, Mom, Dad, you can't believe, like, it totally changed my life. And they said, yeah, of course we believe it. That's why we sent you. Dummy. They didn't say dummy. I remember a conversation I shared last week or a couple weeks ago that I had a dog named Dame, big Rottweiler, as a kid. And at the end of her life, Dame got cancer. And so she actually had a leg amputated. And then we got this trial happening in North Carolina at a veterinary hospital in a university there. And it was free, but we had to drive her down there to have radiation treatments. And so we would drive her down there, and they would do this radiation treatment, and then we'd come back. And she did fine for a while, and eventually Dame got cancer in her other back leg. And so we had to put her down. And the deal with the hospital was, because they gave us all this free cancer treatment, we had to take the dog there. They were going to put her down there, and then they were going to use that body for medical research afterwards. And so we drove from our house to this hospital. It was a 3.5-hour drive with the dog in the back of our station wagon, knowing that at the end of it, we're going to put our dog to sleep. And I remember pulling into the parking lot of the veterinary hospital, and my mom and my dad and the dog and I all got out. And my dad and I fell apart and are just sobbing in the parking lot. And my mom, my poor saintly mother, had to take the dog in by herself while we stayed outside in the parking lot and sit with him while they put the dog to sleep. And I remember as Dad and I are weeping in the parking lot, and my mom's being courageous in the hospital, and my dad looking at me and saying, hey, Jim, I know how sad this is, but part of the promise of our faith is that we live forever, and there's a new heaven and a new earth, and so I think we're going to see Dame again. And in fact, I think that this isn't, I can't imagine like heaven without her, and so I think she's going to be there waiting when we get there. And those are the conversations that shaped my life. And those are the conversations for which I am immensely grateful. Those are the ones where I was instructed as to what it meant to follow the Lord. And so I just want to encourage you to miss a game or miss a practice or miss a rehearsal, but don't miss out on the opportunities to have those talks. They happen around dinner tables and at bedsides. They happen in the middle of the crises of our students' lives, and they happen sometimes when things are going great and we just need to make space for those talks. That's how God's going to use you to bless them. By the way, Paul says two things to parents, actually three things. Don't irritate your children too much. And then he says, instruct them and discipline them in the instruction of the Lord. And that discipline piece is important, not to provoke them to anger, but to protect them. Proverbs says, discipline your children and they will give you rest. They will give you delight to your heart. And so part of our job as parents, as pointing our kids to Jesus, is to set some boundaries, right? Is to say, hey, you know what? These are the limits of screen time in our household, and I know it's not popular, but here they are. Or, hey, I know it's you're tired and you don't really want to get up in the morning, but it's Sunday and we go to church on Sundays, and I'm sorry, but that's just what our family does. That there may be times where you need to say no to something your family, your kids, or your grandkids, or your Sunday school students are so excited about, because saying no can be a powerful spiritual word. I remember when I was finishing 8th grade, summer after 8th grade, my parents said, hey, Jim, we're concerned that you're too busy. They were prescient, I think, in a season where I had a lot going on. They said, hey, you're doing orchestra, and you're doing karate, and you're doing soccer, and obviously churches are non-negotiable for us, and lots of things going on, and school's getting more intense in high school. We think you should drop one of your three things, either the violin or soccer or karate. And I said, great, I'll drop the violin. They said, we think you should drop one of two things, either soccer or karate. Man. And I got to tell you, I was pretty frustrated in 8th grade to give up on one of my favorite pastimes, but it was a gift for me, right? They knew I needed some discipline. They knew that I needed more space to do what God had for me to do, and that meant saying no to some things so I could say yes to others. Bringing up our kids in the discipline and in the instruction of the Lord is our main goal as parents. And I got to say, this is really hard because, number one, we don't have complete control over that, right? I can't force my kids to be Christians. All I can do is try to lead them there so they can make that choice on their own. And the second challenge is that the world tells us that's not really the most important thing. Like we're told all the time, hey, like that church thing is nice and it's a good supplement for the rest of your lives, but it's really not the most important thing. Don't overemphasize it too much. You look like a crazy person, right? And so I have to be reminded sometimes that the stuff that I do, that I did as a kid that was valuable for me, had value in as much as it helped me become the person Christ wanted me to be. I was a history and English double major in college, and it served me fairly well, and I do a lot of talking and writing, so that turned out okay. But I got to tell you, the value of that is not an objective value. It's great that it's helped me, I hope, serve the Lord, but I have this sense that when I've been in the resurrection life for, a couple thousand years, and I bring up some interesting trivia fact about American history, there's going to be people that say, what's America, right? That hasn't existed for thousands of years. Your history is really not that important for us. And I have a concern, a legitimate concern, that when I get to the resurrection and the resurrection life, my English major might not be useful. I don't know if we're going to speak English in heaven or not, right? And I'm just very worried that it's going to be, German or something, and I'm just going to not know anything. All of that stuff was great, right? The gift of school, the gift of sports, the gift of music and arts helped me grow as a person. But it's not an end into itself. It's a means to an end. The end is to be brought up in the discipline and the instruction and the love of the Lord Jesus. Hey, let me say another thing that's really important, because this passage talks a lot, not just about how we respond as parents or grandparents or teachers, but it talks about how we respond as children. All of us are not parents, but all of us are children. And Paul has actually more instruction for kids than he does for parents. We're not going to get into all of it super deep, but he does two things I think that are incredibly important. The first is he singles out parents as worthy of honor. And Paul is merely building upon what God did in the Ten Commandments, right? When God laid out the 10 most important rules for his new community of Israel, he said, hey, there is one position in your community that is more worthy of honor than any other. One position worthy of honor more than kings or presidents, more than judges or veterans, more than pastors or priests. It's the parent. The parent is the position that God said deserves special honor. Again, it doesn't mean that every parent is perfect. It doesn't mean that if our parents are leading us away from Jesus, we don't have to follow them on that path. But it means no matter who our parents are, we respect them and their office, and we honor them. And I think that honor a lot of times comes down to gratitude. I came across this little clip I really enjoyed about thanking parents and what it means to honor them that I want to share with you.
I'm sorry, Mom, for all the endless piles of laundry. Arms up.
Sorry, Dad, for all those sleepless nights.
I'm sorry, Dad, for always getting into trouble.
I'm sorry for not giving you one moment of silence.
I'm sorry for everything.
Really sorry.
Sorry for always fighting with my brother.
For treating you like an ATM machine.
For breaking your heart over and over by thinking I knew better.
Parenting is the hardest thing I've ever done.
But I've learned how to do it from you.
Thank you for teaching me.
That second chances are a gift.
That giving of myself is the strongest way to live.
That I can go one more day.
That parenting is the greatest honor in the world.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to suggest this simple instruction that part of what it means to honor our parents is to be grateful. Right? To be grateful for what they've done and how they have coached us and taught us about how to become women and men of character and women and men of Christ. If we are so privileged as to still have those parents in our lives, whether you're in the home or whether you're out of the home, to recognize what a gift it is to have a coach in your parent, a coach who knows the journey you're on and can direct you on it so that you can be more and more of the person that you wanted to be and God designed you to be. One last thing. It's never too late. I got to say, I've had so many conversations with parents who said, man, I wish I could have done some things differently. Right? I wish I'd done things differently when my kids were in the house. I wish I'd done things differently yesterday afternoon when we had that huge argument. I wish I'd done things differently. And I just want to say, it's never too late. No matter what age you are or what age the generation after you is, you can still be part of God's good plan for their lives. You can still lean into that end goal for them to know the discipline and instruction and love of Jesus. And to have the incredible privilege of living in gratitude for those who have coached you in that same way. So let's make the most of the time today. Thanks be to Him. Amen.